Coming to you from beautiful downtown Merrifield, Virginia, located just steps away from the multiplex cinemas where The Wedding Crashers is in its 25th week of running. It's the Fairfax Sports Report. My name is Greg Wyshynski of the Connection Newspapers. Along beside me this evening, of course, BJ Cooperulis of the Connection Newspapers and Jeff Graham, also of the Connection Newspapers. It's an all Connection skate tonight, boys. Tonight we've got football, we've got field hockey, we've got cross country, and we will discuss the ever-growing controversy at the Washington Redskins quarterback position between Mark Brunell and Patrick Ramsey here on the Fairfax Sports Report. Want to thank the people who make this show possible before we get going, and I'm of course talking about the Underwriters. Quality Care Ford Service Center, conveniently located in Fairfax, servicing all makes and models, 703-383-6299, and CCI Screen Printing for all of your screen printing needs, 703-978-0257. Boys, for lack of any real substantive news in the northern region this week, let's get right into the football. The big football review, as we call it here on the Fairfax Sports Report. The game everyone's talking about in the northern region is ironically a non-region game. It's Robinson and Good Counsel. It's a game that basically determined that the Robinson Rams, who already were probably the best team in Northern Virginia, maybe the best team in the entire D.C. metro area, a 21-6 win over Good Counsel. Anything surprise you about that game, boys?
Well, what surprised me is the top two teams in the Washington Post lost on the same night. I expected more out of the number one team, but from what I heard, it was a pretty much one-sided game. Robinson was able to control the ball against Good Counsel, so. For Good Counsel and DeMatha, not a good week for the WCAC.
Not much more to add to that. I mean, you got a team in Good Counsel that, and I'm not saying that they do, but, you can recruit, you can bring players in and that sort of thing. But you got a school in Robinson that is a public school, and usually the advantage goes to the private schools. And there's always been a battle and philosophy and theories of, private schools better than public schools, or some others think vice versa. But for Robinson to go up there and step up for all public schools, I guess a lot of people were smiling.
Represent public school. Yeah. Right. Stay in school, everybody. That's the other advice we'll give
That's
you.
Right.
Stay in school.
That's right.
The thing that impressed me about Robinson, obviously, is the 6 in this 21-6 score. Their defense is a unit that's been in flux throughout the beginning of the season and the preseason, and also in their first game against Fairfax. They've used different people in and out. But obviously the philosophy is the same. That's a unit that's going to have to be very, very good in order for the Rams to win the Concord District this year, because you're talking about teams like Centerville and Westfield and Oakton that know how to put some points on the board. So the fact that they held Good Counsel to 6 points is a good sign, I think, at this point in the season for Robinson. And again, I mean, to be honest with you, we're talking about what amounts to an exhibition game. The game doesn't have any bearing on their power points in Northern Virginia. It doesn't have any bearing on their postseason standing. But from a pride perspective, it's huge. From a stature of the program perspective, it's huge. And they had a crowd of like 4,500 people at the game. So right there, that should tell you that this was a very important moment for Northern Region football. And the rest of the region looks better with Robinson having won this game as convincingly as they did. So.
What I'm interested to see if this is kind of the start of something that happens year in and year out, whether we have some of these teams take on some private schools. I think you see it sometimes in the lower ranks, like Paul VI is a team that's has gone out to play some of the teams out in Loudon and maybe a team here or there, but nothing of this magnitude.
And I think you have to give Robinson coach Mark Bendorf a lot of credit for this, because he actively sought teams that he wanted to come to Northern Virginia and challenge his team. I mean, he looked at teams from North Carolina to maybe come up and play Robinson. He wanted this game to not just be a chance for Robinson to play a different opponent than they usually play. He wanted this game to be a test for the program, and clearly they passed it. I mean, it's a very impressive win.
Well, I mean, you speak to the level of football, and if that's not enough to make some people around here want it to continue as a game that maybe happens every year between those two schools, maybe create some sort of rivalry, really harp on that public-private. If that's not enough to get that going, then I guess the people involved should look at the gate as well. When you have 4,500 people come out to watch a game, I think that's going to be a little bit of inspiration to keep that rivalry and keep that game going. So
and I think it's good to see too, because in basketball you always see kind of these interstate rivalries when they go on spring break trips. They're always playing teams from Florida, Kentucky, Hernan. I know basketball team has gone out to Chicago, so it's nice for the sport.
There you go.
Kind of see something different.
Westfield defeats Annandale 38-14. Westfield now 2-0 on the season. And Evan Royster up to 417 yards rushing, 5 rushing touchdowns on 31 carries, and he's averaging 13.5 yards per carry.
And I think
the average actually dropped this week, I believe.
I think that's what Coach Urbanek likes. He likes to see, him putting up good yards per average, yards per carry average, and that, he's not having to carry the ball 25 times a game. And here's a kid who did put up, great stats last year, but I think he wore down a little bit as the year progressed. And then, once the playoffs, were around, he wasn't at 100%. So it's good to kind of keep him at these, in these games that, that Westfield's controlling, he's not having to run so much.
Right. And it should be said that I had an off-the-record conversation with a coach in the area this week who told me that it's sort of known within coaching circles that the Westfield coaching staff, and Tom Burbank in particular, has a little bit more faith in this team than it had been led on in the beginning of the season, that this team might be a little bit better than they were being sold as at the beginning of the season when we were doing previews. You've covered this team since the training camp. Do you feel that this team's a little as good as some of the other great Westfield teams that Verbanek's had there, or do you think that it's being oversold a little bit?
It would be hard to say that they're as good as they were in their state championship year. Maybe they are a little bit better than they were last year. Although last year they were, they were dominant during the regular season and met up with Oakton in the playoffs and got handled pretty well. But I think their defense might be improved. Coach Urbanek said this weekend, our offense didn't play very well. They were only up 10-0 in the first half, but their defense really played well. And they've only given up 7 points, in this game, and against a pretty decent team. So I'd be interested to see how Westfield's defense, maybe more than their offense, kind of stacks up in some of these bigger games that we're going to see.
Right, and I think BJ, it's starting to look more and more that defense is going to be what decides the champion coming out of the Concord District this year. I mean, obviously Robinson has stepped up defensively. Mm-hmm. Westfield stepped up defensively. Oakton, we know, is pretty stout defensively, and Centerville, at least in one of their first 2 games, looked very good defensively. I think they might have taken a little step back this past week and allowed a few yards they shouldn't have allowed against.
But then again, they were probably playing a lot of their second teamers, so it's kind of hard to say in these early games.
But still, I mean, Hayfield, who they defeated this week, this past Friday, 56-14, is averaging over 300 yards. Total yards on offense, and I mean that's a pretty stout number to put up against Centerville. I mean, one can assume that they weren't going, 4 and out, and then all of a sudden the second half put up all those yards. They were definitely moving the ball a little bit, I think.
Right.
Yeah, I think that with some of these teams putting up big numbers in week 1, you may come to expect that they'll keep doing that. And I saw, you can't look at a score like 56-14 Centerville over Hayfield and say that it's not a big number. But when they go out in week 1 and blow out an opponent with scoring over 60 points, you kind of get accustomed to that. And that's something I talked to some of the kids about this weekend over at the Outback Bowl. Oakton beat up on Madison a little bit. And they felt like after they had a bye week in week 1, and they felt like they had to come out and put up a lot of points on an opponent, because they had to show, hey, we can do that too. This is a statement. We got to make a statement. We got to say we can compete in this Concord district with these high-powered offenses that are, not facing each other yet. And when that happens, I don't think you're going to see these blowout scores.
And it's something we talked about last week, this sort of psychological game that's being played. It's the same thing we see in college football all the time, where Nebraska blows out their cupcake in week 1, and Oklahoma blows out their cupcake in week 1, just to show. Just for that psychological jockeying early in the season, and it's the same thing we're seeing here in the Northern region. You mentioned the Outback Bowl, 35-14 Oakton, a very convincing victory, I'd have to say. What did you see in that game that kind of stood out for you?
Well, in fact, I mean, it was a convincing victory on paper, 35-14, but it really wasn't even that close. A couple of scores, slid through for Madison. They decided to keep running the ball. They had a couple turnover problems, in the air, but it's because they got down early and they were forced to throw the ball, and they got picked off 3 times. Earlier in the season, I came on and I said, I think Oakton's going to be the one coming out of the Concord district, and I'm going to stick with that right now, just from what I saw. Even though Centerville and Robinson and Westfield look great, I still see Oakton as just the complete team. They showed it again. I mean, obviously they played against a Liberty team in Madison that, talent-wise and size-wise and all those things are different when those 2 districts, collide. But Oakton looked very complete. They've got so many position players, and their quarterback Kevin Houghton, he completed some passes, looked really crisp. and a receiver in Irvin Gardner that could open up the running game now for Keith Payne, who's in the backfield, who had a great night. Rushed for nearly 100 yards and 2 touchdowns and sat out the whole fourth quarter.
Wow.
So, I mean, you've got a lot of pieces there that you've got to basically pick your poison when you play them. And that's the reason I stick with that team in the Concord, because Robinson seems to have weapons, Centerville has weapons, Westfield has weapons, but it seems like their weapons are so specific to one part of the game that I don't want to go as far as calling them one-dimensional, because they've got talent in other spots. I just think Oakton has more.
Speaking of games that on paper looked a certain way, but not necessarily were that way live, the Baron Cameron Bowl between Herndon and South Lakes, it was a 42-0 final.
Yeah.
But it actually was a little bit closer than that in the first half, wasn't it?
Yeah, it can't be much closer when they don't score. But, I mean, it's tough, because from the people that I spoke to after the game, and who were at the game, I was obviously covering the Outback Bowl, but they said that it actually, like you said, it was closer. I mean, South Lakes moved the ball. They moved the ball well, and they got it in the red zone twice before the half. Both times they didn't score. That's really tough when you're playing a Concord team in Herndon that has held the overall record in this battle for the past at least 12 years. So you've got to be able to put points on the board, using a cliche, but it's true. You got to. 42-0, it's a tough way to start your season. Unfortunately, it's something South Lakes has gotten used to. And they've got to get something going in that running game over there to be successful. But just quick mention on Herndon, great game in Zay Lopez, quarterback over at Herndon. They've been a run team, and you have a quarterback stepping up now, and a couple of other backs that are stepping in to make that a pretty multi-dimensional team. And don't be surprised if Herndon sneaks up on one of these Concord teams that may have written them off. So.
Jeff, let's say that your name isn't Jeff Graham for a moment, that your name is South Lakes. SL, we'll call you for short. How exactly do you recover from a game in which you lose to your geographic rival 42-0, and the next week on your schedule, the Centerville Wildcats come to town? What's your mindset now? Can you even be in a game at that point?
I mean, I don't see how. Centerville has been putting up, they've scored more points than any other team in the region thus far, and I mean, they're just blowing by people. They're playing a lot of their second teamers in the second half. So I mean, for Coach Ellenberger, I know he's got pride over there, and he's just going to say, hey, we're just going to go out there and fight. But I mean, it's going to be real hard. I mean, I just say start it, trying to score. I mean, they weren't able to do it against Herndon, so let's say, hey, let's try to get a touchdown, let's try to get some points on the board, and we'll start from there. I think teams that haven't scored and have struggled early on this season, I mean, there's been a number of shutouts, so that's kind of one of the things where you just start with, say, hey, let's get on the scoreboard and let's go from there.
It seems like South Lakes, I mean, their schedule, I mean, just starting the season, they've got. Obviously, they played Herndon, then they've got Centerville, and then after that, they take on Jefferson, Woodson. They go to Madison, Falls Church, Langley, Marshall, McLean, Stonebridge. So later in the season, things may open up and look a little bit different. It's just really tough at the high school level, especially. Kids start getting down on themselves after maybe losing by some pretty decisive points there, but. They just got to keep their heads up, and like Jeff said, Coach Ellenberger's a guy that wants them to compete. So, hopefully, can't write them off. I said the same thing last week. They went out and, gave up 42 points, but you can't write off a team. That's why they play the games. So,
right. And speaking about teams that needed a little pick-me-up in the second week of competition, WT Woodson defeats Fairfax 20-14 in overtime, but the Rebels come back in this game to tie it, send it into overtime. They got blown out in week 1. They hang a lot tougher in week 2 against Woodson, and they've got Madison coming to town in week 3. This was a game to me that kind of spoke to the sort of resiliency you look for in a football team to come back in a game against your city rival. Kyle Schmidt moved from sort of a running back role to a quarterback role. They rally in the game, lose in overtime, but I think it was a pretty respectable showing from Fairfax going into the glut of the schedule. In week 3, they'll have a game against Madison, their old Liberty District rival, and then of course they'll probably take their lumps in the Concord. But I think it was a good showing for them in week 2.
And I think that's why I think a lot of us picked Fairfax this week, because they did show some progression over week 1, and we're going to need to see that out of Madison. Madison took a tough loss. I know they don't like losing to Oakton, but I mean they're going to have to bounce back and get better than they showed last week.
You make a good point right there. I did not notice that until you said it, that in the Connection Pigskin Prognosticator box, we did all pick Fairfax, just like we did all pick Oakton in their game this week. against Stonebridge, which is sort of interesting because Stonebridge, in their first game in the Northern Region, walks in and beats West Springfield 21-14. Now, this game, from a lot of accounts, has been called an upset. But you, Jeff, and you, BJ, have both covered Stonebridge in the past. Not necessarily an upset this game, is it?
Just talking to some people at the game and maybe going in, I thought it was probably going to be an even game. It was just hard to tell, being a new team. But, somebody came out of the stands before the game on Stonebridge's side and said, we're going to blitz West Springfield's quarterback, Peter Lalich. That's what we're going to do. He better get ready. He's not a running quarterback. And lo and behold, that's what they did. Almost every down, and West Springfield is predominantly a passing team, every down they were bringing somebody either up the middle, they were disguising their coverages, bringing people off the edge, and he was really rattled. And West Springfield wasn't able to establish much of a running game. On the other hand, Stonebridge, first half ran all over West Springfield. They play a variation of the wing offense, so there's a lot of movement and guys kind of running around. And Shamar Knight Justice and quarterback Terrence Glenn just really ran at them, got a 21-0 lead, and that was enough. Stonebridge, had a couple injuries, had some fumbles. Second half, West Springfield was able to come back in the fourth quarter, but they just ran out of time. When you get behind 3 touchdowns going into the fourth, you're going to have some things go your way, and Stonebridge was able to get out in front and hold on.
I talked to a coach, kind of an off-the-record situation as well, in the Liberty, though, that is none too happy about facing Mickey Thompson and Stonebridge, but said that, it could have been a situation where West Springfield says, hey, who's this AA team coming in? We can, it's no problem. We got these kids. And you may get a little high on yourself. This is, obviously, we don't know this firsthand, but, it's just a coach speaking to the level of what high school players are accustomed to doing. And, it seemed like, I covered Stonebridge last year, and I was shocked by it. I know, Jeff, you said it would be more of an even game going there. I did not. I thought that from the talent that they lost last year, a lot of kids went on to play college ball. Ed Wang now at Virginia Tech, looking like he's going to get some playing time. Sean Ryan playing baseball somewhere else. Sean set all these records for them last year. Apparently they recovered pretty well, and Mickey Thompson has a knack for finding that talent, hiding it well before the season starts, and then coming out and making some a big shocking debut in AAA ball. So
right, and Knight Justice had 23 carries, 144 yards. It's a pretty stout number against the Springfield defense that was supposed to be a little bit better than they showed in week 1.
And for Springfield, it's kind of hard to say now. A lot of people, I think we on our preview show picked them to win the Patriot. They were at home. They're a Division 6 school. Stonebridge is a Division 5 school. So it's West Springfield's got to bounce back this week, and they have a tough one against Edison, probably who we would say is the top Division 5 program right now.
Probably. We'll cover that game in a second because it's a very, very interesting matchup. You're absolutely right. The thing about the Stonebridge victory that and you touched on it, BJ, that I think is going to be felt for weeks to come is them walking in and beating a Division 6 team like this on their home field. That has an enormous psychological impact on the rest of the Liberty District, who is going to have to now face this new program. All of a sudden, it's sort of the same thing, to be honest with you, that I saw when South Lakes moved to the Liberty in boys basketball. Like, it's the psychological impact of a program that, for the most part, seems a little bit ahead of everybody else in the district coming in and being established all of a sudden as this favorite. They go from being an X factor to a favorite real quick, based on one victory, and I think it's going to have an enormous psychological impact in their games in the Liberty this season.
And I think some of the things that Stonebridge has in its on its side is that they're a team that scouts very well. At one play during the West Springfield game, they did an onside kick where you kick it 10 yards, and West Springfield kids were running, didn't even really know it was coming. And Mickey Thompson said on film, we saw that that was available to us, and we felt comfortable we were going to get it. So they scout really well. And then they have a lot of trick plays. They'll punt from on fourth down with using their quarterback. They'll do some things. So they're a team that I definitely think we have to look out for. And on West Springfield's side, I know a lot of Patriot District teams are saying, hey, this is a team, pick to win. We can go in there and beat them. The Lake Braddocks, some of these other teams who hope to play well this year.
Well, speaking about the Liberty District right now, the team that continues to be on top in the district inexplicably are the Marshall Statesmen, who had another victory, their second of the season, a 33-26 win against the Wakefield Warriors, who are now 0-2 after going 0-10 last season. 33-26 seems kind of close for a game against Wakefield. What's the story there?
Well, here's the thing. Wakefield is not Wakefield's kind of like Marshall, where Wakefield is not the Wakefield that everybody thinks Wakefield is. They've got a pretty potent passing attack that a lot of coaches are bragging on. Marshall is not the Marshall that everybody thinks they are either. So these teams are coming out and putting up points on each other and impressing people along the way. Marshall should have scored a lot more points. Their kicker is out with a bad back and is questionable for this week in their game matchup against Jeb Stewart. Which would take Marshall to 3-0, like I've been saying they're going to be all year.
And Stewart comes in off a loss to George Mason High School.
Okay. Well, so maybe they will go 3-0. Maybe it wasn't the toughest schedule to start off against, but hey, it gets Marshall what they needed, and it's a little bit of a boost of confidence. They've got a player over there that we mentioned last week. Want to mention him again because he had another breakout game. Jordan Colbreth is second right now in the northern region in receiving and yards. He's got 8 receptions for 185 yards and 23.1 average. He's got one receiving touchdown, but he's also tied for the lead in overall rushing and receiving touchdowns with Robinson's Lucas Caparelli. And Marshall's also at the top of the Liberty District. So kind of weird to see all that stuff with Marshall being in the upper echelon of football. I don't think it'll stay that way. You know, they've got a tougher schedule coming up now. They get the cupcakes out of the way, but it's good to see that they're not one of those cupcakes anymore.
Yes. Well, thanks for watching Marshall Chalk Talk, everybody. Join us next.
Oh, man.
I want to mention the Yorktown Patriots for a moment. 39-14 over West Potomac. The interesting thing that's happening with this team right now is you have Max Millian, who we knew was going to be a dynamic running back for them. He's second in the region right now with 307 yards rushing. He's got 3 touchdowns. There's another kid on the team named Steve Smith. He's got 237 yards rushing, and he had 3 touchdowns against the Wolverines. Let's see. A really fast kid and a really powerful kid. Mm-hmm. You, my friend, remember Dwayne Tigney and John Crone from a couple years ago with that Yorktown team. This is very reminiscent of the same kind of lightning and thunder thing that Coach Bruce Hanson gets going with that program. And if they've got that rolling, if the defense holds up its end of the bargain, this is going to be a team to watch out for in Division 5.
And as we've said, you know, we kind of picked them right behind Edison in the National District. You mentioned Thunder and Lightning. BJ and I are Giants fans. We had a little bit of Thunder and Lightning for a couple seasons before Ron Dane decided to eat a couple too many hamburgers. But it's good to see Yorktown playing well. I'm really interested to see when they play Edison. It's going to be hard to kind of keep an eye on them when they're playing the Wakefields and Stewart and some of those teams. But
and I should say, as a Jets fan, we basically just have uncomfortable humidity. We don't really have any thunder or lightning. It's kind of a sad situation.
And you do fumble 6 times.
We fumble 6 times. I know. He's still learning the offense. Give him a little cut him a break, okay? Not the brightest
bull. And you draft a kicker in the first round.
We drafted a kicker in the first
draft.
round. I know. And we also drafted Blair Thomas ahead of Junior Seau. Okay, well, that's a whole different show, my friend.
You and Greeny should get together and do a little show.
Exactly. Very good. Edison 40, Washington Lee 6. In a game about as competitive as the Jets and Chiefs this from last weekend. Edison, as we said, is the class of Division 5. They put up another big number against the Generals. Justin Smith, wide receiver, now 142 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns. Devin Clark for Edison, third in the Northern Region in rushing, 268 yards, 1 touchdown, 8.4 yards a carry. And Keone Clark, who's the fullback in that team, also had a pretty big day for the Eagles. They now, as we transitioned into our Week 3 preview, they now host the West Springfield Spartans this week in a game that has completely divided the prognostication community in the Connection newspapers. I think that West Springfield's going to come back, win this game, and everyone else thinks Edison's gonna win. Why do you think Edison's gonna win this game?
Well, because I've been listening to you drinking the Edison juice all year, so I got to go with Edison.
Flavor, actually.
I mean, you got to look. I mean, it's a good pick to make. If we're talking clearly picks here, it's a good pick to make because they are coming off a really tough loss. It may have been a little wake-up call for them to come back in and play to a higher level against an Edison team that may be in West Springfield's shoes now, where everybody's talking about them. With that psychology that we talk about in football and sports overall, it's a good pick to make. I mean, I don't think they're going to have enough to get over the hump that Edison is, and they got a lot of offensive weapons over there, like we mentioned in our preview and in Week 1. So I don't know. Let me give you my upset of the week if I can. Would you mind?
Go right ahead.
All right. we just talked about Yorktown. That's why I wanted to slide it in.
Oh, very good.
I think McLean is going to get that one. I don't know why. I have the feeling that yeah, they are traveling to Yorktown, but McLean is a team that not a lot of people think about when they think about top tier teams. But I think that they've got a coach over there that really knows what he's doing. They've got a quarterback that played backup to one of the region's best last year, Oldenburg. They've got a running back that rushed for 262 yards and 3 touchdowns this week. Now let me mix that up for you a little bit and tell you that it was against a brand new South County team. So we're going to really see what McLean is all about this week. But I think they've got a lot of weapons.
You're shaking your head no over there. What's going on?
I mean, I think Yorktown's still better. I mean, you say McLean's not the upper echelon. They're probably it's a stretch to say they're middle echelon. I mean, when you play South County and these teams, it's hard.
How many echelons are there?
I think there's
upper.
about.
You've got middle. Is there a lower echelon?
Well, there's an upper, and I think there's a lower upper, and so there could be 6, 7, 8.
So what you're saying is that this is reminiscent of last week when I was saying South Lakes had a chance against Hurd.
That could be exactly what I'm saying.
I think Yorktown's going to win this game too, because I think that their running game is of a higher quality than anything McLean has seen yet.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've only seen South County, but I think the question's going to come down to, can McLean's DBs and linebackers, and more importantly their line, put a little pressure on that passing game? Because Yorktown's Achilles heel is their defense this season. Their defense has to be better. And McLean is, I watched the Rivera team last year. They're a very good offensive team. I mean, they've got a good scheme. They can move the ball a little bit, especially throwing the ball. And that's going to be, it's going to come down to that. It's Yorktown's defense against McLean's offense. And that's a battle McLean has to win, because I think Yorktown's going to be able to put some points on the board.
You're right. I mean, it's maybe wasn't the smartest pick to make this week, but I think that if looking at all the games, I think that's one upset that could happen. It's a possible upset, and
I do think McLean is better than they were last year, just like Marshall, and this could be a very good game.
Right.
And it could be a blowout.
Exactly. And that being said, I mean, to be fair to BJ, he was the only one out of 9 people to pick McLean.
Look, when McLean gets the big W, we're gonna talk a little different talk next week. They've got a lot of weapons: senior receivers, big body tight end, got a couple defensive backs. Got a quarterback that's been groomed, and a running back that put up big numbers in week 1. Granted, against the South County team, but could have been a boost of confidence for him. So
to review: big bodied, well groomed,
confidence,
very good.
Rivera. Only one that picked McLean.
Try the Danish.
All right.
Speaking of the big W, I don't like to brag. I'm 18-2 this season in picking these games, and BJ, you and
But let it be said, you also do pick the games to pick.
Now what is that? Now what am I? Okay. What do I have? Biff's magic book from Back to the Future 2? I know what's going to happen. Give me a break. BJ, you and I both picked Langley this week to defeat the mighty Jefferson Colonials. Jeff, probably because his name is Jeff, picked Jefferson. But
is that how we make our picks?
I think so. Well,
I can't wait till Stonebridge plays the BJs.
Yeah, exactly. If there was Gregtown High School, I'd probably pick that every week too.
Oh, man.
Or Wyszynskiville. I picked Langley because I think that they're going to be really ticked off they lost to Lee.
That's exactly
Lee walked into their house and beat them.
Yeah.
And this was a Lee team that I didn't think had any business beating Langley.
Yeah.
But I think that it should be said, though, that I don't think I necessarily saw Lee played to its full potential against Edison. I think that Lee played the kind of offense that it thought it needed to play to beat Edison, which was to control the clock and to play sort of a time management thing, and it didn't really work. They couldn't move the ball. I think this last week against Langley, you saw Greg Jones get out and rush the ball a bunch of times. Brandon Cameron had a strong game, and Lee's a little bit better than we saw in week 1. That said, I mean, Langley was supposed to be the class delivery district. You can't lose that game to Lee at home, can you?
No, I understand that. I mean, it's a tough opening loss for them. I've got Langley. I've been touting them all year as coming out of that Liberty district. Stonebridge coming in and making a name for themselves. It may be a little different. But hey, I mean, Langley can bounce back this week. I mean, they're playing a pretty tough passing attack in Jefferson, who's got Matt Wong, who just tore up the district last year. Obviously they're moving districts now, but tore it up last year. He had 20 touchdowns on 2,000 yards passing. So they're going to have to lock down defensively, and they're going to have to stop them from moving that ball, which is something they could not do against Lee. talked to Howerton, the coach over at Langley, this week, and he said that Langley moved the ball well this week. They just couldn't put points on the board, and it's something that they've got to get over. They're struggling to kind of find their identity right now. Trevor Bacon was a big loss for them, and they've got the linemen that open the holes. They just need to get the backs to step up and hit the holes and put some
The
points on the
old big
board.
lineman rule.
Yes.
Sometimes it doesn't work
You and I
out.
have had this big lineman debate for years. Every year there's a team with big linemen, and what's the question?
Well, either you don't have somebody to run behind those big linemen, or those big linemen, tire out throughout the game.
Or an
and
Easter
don't-
Island statue.
That's right. not really the movers.
I must say, I think
Shakers.
Langley's going to bounce back this week and move back into the upper echelon, if you will, of the Liberty District. I think they've got that potential. I think it took them a minute to realize, hey, we don't have a guy that's going to run the ball on every play anymore. We need to figure out who we are. It's game time, and I think they're realizing that. So
Now, Mr. Graham, Jefferson, it should be noted, gave up 20. They won 36-20 against Falls Church last week. Gave up 20 points to a pretty good offensive team, but they picked off quarterback Joey Collins 4 times. So obviously you're dealing with a Jefferson team that may be a little bit better defensively than people give them credit for. The offense gets so much publicity.
Right. I mean, I think so, and I know you said you picked them. You picked Langley because they're ticked off, and you picked West Springfield because
Right.
they're
Well, also because they're
yeah.
green, and I'm wearing green tonight. Some of my favorite colors.
And I think
it should be noted that I have you see here, I got the green shirt on because I disagree with this totalitarian blue shirt mindset that producer.
And I am
Brian
wearing
Hearn
blue,
has.
Jefferson blue over here. I guess you could say.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I just think Jefferson is a better team, and the better team is going to win this week. I think.
That's it.
thank you for that insight, Jeff.
Lake Braddock at Annandale is a very interesting game because you're dealing with it's sort of a funny thing because this week, or last week it should be said, Lake Braddock broke their losing streak. They went 0-10 last season. In their first game this season, they beat Chantilly. They're now 1-0. Jim Poythress gets his first win there. Congratulations to the Bruins. It's a great win. But I picked them last week because I thought that Chantilly would come into that game not being able to replicate the intensity they had in week 1 when they broke their own losing streak. Now Lake Braddock faces the same scenario going into Annandale, where are they going to be able to have the same intensity they had at home in front of a big crowd in their first game, trying to break that losing streak? Can they replicate that intensity against an Annandale team, which is 0-2? And in the words of our esteemed colleague Rich Sanders, who's only been writing about high school sports in Northern Virginia since, I believe, the 1940s, Annandale under Coach Dick Adams will not. He said it right here in the paper. No way a Dick Adams coach team is going 0-3. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's going to be close because Annandale, was shut out on opening night against Chantilly and only put up 14, I believe, last week against Westfield. So they're not putting up a lot of points. And in Lake Braddock's opening win, it was a 14-6 game, I believe. So I think this is going to be, it's probably going to be a low-scoring game. So chances are it's going to be one possession. So it's going to be close. It's hard to tell, man. I thought Annandale was better than I guess they've been playing. Lake Braddock, it's this could be the start of something good for them. If they're able to reel off a couple wins going into that district schedule, they people could be picking them to win. So it's real interesting this week.
The interesting thing about Braddock right now is they've sort of developed a passing game. They have a kid named Shane Hawley who won the job before the season. He's a young kid, inexperienced. I think he has a baseball background. Great arm, though. And Coach Poythress said you can see heat coming off the ball when he throws it. He didn't throw the ball very often against Chantilly, but when he did, it was very effective. In fact, the game-clinching score against Chantilly was a long touchdown pass. So that adds another dimension to a team that already has a pretty solid, established running game. So it'll be kind of interesting to see if they throw a little bit more against Annandale or not. But it's an interesting game, and that could have a lot, like you said, of repercussions for the Patriot District this season, depending on who wins that game. If Annandale can break their little losing streak, it's their first district game too, so that's a whole clean slate for them. So there you go. Madison at Fairfax, we talked about. Westfield and Woodson. Obviously, Woodson comes into this game having even their record at 1-1. Any chance, do you think, for the Cavaliers in this game against the Mighty Bulldogs, or do you think this is sort of a mismatch?
If Evan Worcester decides to take a college recruiting trip and miss the game, maybe. Centerville pretty much destroyed Woodson on opening night. Westfield maybe not as strong offensively, but definitely one of the better offenses. Josh Whitmer and Mike Glennon have been playing quarterback over there. They've each thrown touchdowns in both of their 2 games. So I think Westfield's going to be able to take care of this one pretty easily.
Lee at Herndon is an interesting game from the perspective that Lee was able to win a big road game in week 2. Any chance, do you think, in that game for the Lancers against the Hornets who come off that big win against South Lakes?
It's hard to gauge because Herndon just played a South Lakes team that couldn't score. You couldn't see how they reacted to getting scored on, it looked like, I guess, Herndon didn't have to do so much to win that game, but they did anyway. So we'll see what happens when Herndon faces a little bit of adversity. But like I said, they've got some weapons over there that are just developing, and they could be a scary team in that Concord district. They're middle of the pack every year. They could come up and bite a couple teams this year. So I look for Herndon to take Lee out.
Which echelon do you think
I'm sorry, I forgot how many echelons there were.
There's at least 14. I want to remind everybody that every week you can see our picks in the Connection newspapers, which I believe are you find them in your mailbox or anywhere they're delivered.
Or your local barbershop.
Barbershops, libraries,
police stations,
stations, high schools, some bathroom floors probably if you're reading it.
Our
in there.
bathroom, I think, has
Definitely. Let's switch gears for a moment.
how we digress.
Exactly, and talk about, and this is an awkward transition, field hockey. Field hockey is a sport that is if it's really well played between a couple of teams, can be a lot of fun to watch. But I think that we are all in agreement that sometimes you get those games between one good team and one bad team, or 1 or 2 bad teams, and it's kind of a little hard to watch it. Now, I was at the Robinson-Jefferson game on Monday night, and that was a very easy game to watch. It went to overtime. It was very exciting. It was 0-0, and Jefferson ended the game in double overtime. In overtime, they drop the number of players on each side to 7. It's usually 11. They drop it to 7. And one of the parents in the stands commented that the game was a lot more exciting in overtime than it was the rest of the game. Now, I bring this up because it does have a certain professional sports parallel. Professional hockey, the NHL, BJ.
Is that a professional sport still?
That's exactly. It comes back this season. The Caps open camp this week, and it was very exciting. Professional hockey drops to 4-on-4 in overtime, and a lot of people say, hey, this 4-on-4 thing, it's pretty exciting. It's up and down. There's no trapping. There's a lot more shots, a lot more chances. And there have been people both in the sport and outside the sport that have said, hey, why not play the entire game 4-on-4? It'd be a lot of fun, a lot of offense, good for television. So my question to the panel here is, when you look at a sport like field hockey, you look at a sport like professional hockey, and I think also in soccer as well, I mean, where do you draw the line? Is it more important to keep the tradition of having a certain number of players on the field or on the ice? Or do you eventually have to say to yourself, all right, well, maybe you do adapt. Maybe you do go to a different format if the games are more exciting that way?
Well, I mean, I think the way they do it now is good to kind of, play it more traditionally during the regular portion of the game, and then in overtime they drop it down. I think it's more kind of exhibitionist if you do it, like 4-on-4 hockey. I mean, I know, in football, if they say they put 3 people on each team, it would be, Hail Mary after Hail Mary. Baseball has its kind of home run derby kind of thing.
Let me interject something, because I agree with you, and you and I both hate the shootout because it's a ridiculous way, and it's the same thing in field hockey. I mean, penalty strokes are a horrible way to end a game.
And for a lot of people, it's exciting because it's like, hey, you have a chance to score, every time someone comes down to the ice. But is that really a game, or is that? It's
not. But that being said, 7-on-7 and 4-on-4 are definitely, you do have elements of the game within that format. It's not as if it's a goalie, a shot, and blind luck.
Right.
You're still playing a system. You're still passing. You're still shooting. You're still up and down. You're playing defense. So it's not as if you're completely trashing the tenets of the game.
Right. You're creating more chances, but still having it be within a game.
But your contention is that it's not necessarily the game. I mean, it's if you're going and dropping it that low.
True, and in high school it's kind of hard to say too, because the level of play isn't that of maybe college or professional. So I mean, a lot of times you're getting kids out there and all they're doing is swinging and hacking, and they don't really have any idea where the ball's going. But I mean, I think when you do see some of the better teams like Robinson and Jefferson, or Westfield had an invitational here a couple weeks ago, and there was some quality play there. I think the better teams, you will see more skill, better opportunities.
BJ, are you a swinger or a hacker by trade?
Man, I think I'm a little bit of both.
That's a loaded question, I just realized.
Look, the only reason that people, and to answer your original question, which was, do you think this would be better? The only reason that people think it's better is because it's different.
Yeah.
But if it was 4-on-4s, they'd say, oh, this would be better if it were 2-on-2. It's just. It's just because it's changed up.
Or 20 years from now, after 20 years of 4-on-4, I wish they go back to 5-on-5. Now that was.
But I mean, when you really think about it, what it comes down to is 20 years from now, there's not going to be professional hockey.
or professional softball, for that matter.
Because the Outdoor Life Network is going to bomb. All right, ESPN should have got the contract. And hey, man, I'm sorry to rain on your parade. I know you love hockey, but it's just not going to be around.
If it wasn't for OLN, there'd be like no bullfighting or bull riding at all.
I'm telling you, the X Games are going to step up and they're going to take the place of hockey.
That's right.
I hate to say it because X Games, hey, they're fun to watch, but it's a sideshow.
Ultimate Street Luge will replace a centuries-old league.
I hope Ultimate Fighting replaces it, man. That is an awesome. Have you been watching that on Spike? Can we do a quick segment on this?
I'm a hockey fan. I already have Ultimate Fighting.
Man, Ultimate Fighting, that UFC show, incredible.
I'm sure.
Incredible.
That's good to hear.
I'm sorry to bring that up.
That's fine.
We'll get back.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Cross country. The Monroe Parker Invitational was held this last Saturday at the Burke Lake Park in beautiful Burke, Virginia. And Erin Klein won the girls' race for Lake Braddock, a big win. She was the only runner to go under 18 minutes. And Brad Saragusa, once again, regaining form, because Jeff, you and I both know something funky happened in the spring season, the outdoor season, wins the boys' title at Monroe Parker. Jefferson wins the boys' team title, and Westfield wins the girls' team title over Lake Braddock, who finished second. Of course, the big story of the race, who wasn't there. Oakton's girls, considered to be the deepest team in the northern region, and maybe even in the state, not there. So even Westfield's coach, Emily Utter, said, it's a great win, but we don't really know how we're going to stack up until we actually face off against Oakton. And then also, Hernan's big runners and Oakton's, a couple of their runners on the boys' side were not there. So we have to see exactly where they're going to fit into the picture as well when we get to districts and regionals and things like that. But a good start for Saragusa, and obviously on the girls' side, it's going to be wide open all season.
I think for Saragusa, the interesting quote that I read in your story today about second place finisher Mike Spooner. Mm-hmm. Was that Saragusa said here's a guy that likes to get out in front and will go right from the start gun, and he said in a couple months he's going to do that and no one's going to be able to catch up to him. And my thing is is Saragusa talking about himself? I mean, does he feel like Spooner is going to be able to just get out and I think Saragusa typically runs more from behind, so I think that should be an interesting matchup, further down the road.
He's a kid who likes to rally. He obviously, even in the Monroe Parker, he ran behind Spooner for at least half the race. I think Spooner showed in the outdoor season he has the ability to put away a field of runners quickly with his speed off the start. But the question is whether or not if he catches Saragusa on the wrong day for Saragusa and the right day for Spooner, he can win the race just by putting him away early. But the question is whether or not he's going to be able to hold off a rally that Saragusa is going to have.
That's why cross country is great. You see, strategies even in between runners.
Right.
People take different approaches to winning, and sometimes it's different on a different day. So it'll be interesting to see.
Right. And Erin Klein was that sort of runner. She ran behind two runners for most of the race, and then made her move, allowed those two runners to kind of tire each other out, and then made her move to win later in the race. So it is a kind of a fun race to watch strategy-wise. It's a good start, and we'll see where it goes. I mean, obviously now we have a bunch of invitationals and dual meets and things like that before we get to districts.
I think that's what districts is really good, because everybody has to be there. You can't hide. You can't say, oh, we were at another meet. You're gonna see who's the best.
There you go. Well, boys, let's shift gears, what have you, for a moment, and talk a little about the professionals in town. We are all not fans of the Washington Redskins, so I believe that
you mean professionals Washington Redskins? I didn't know that they were
you see, now you're going to get
professional
letters. So we kind of bring a different perspective than the people that suck down the Kool-Aid every year. whatever they're serving. So what's your take on this whole thing? I'm baffled by the quarterback controversy. I mean, you got Patrick Ramsey, who to me is not Gibbs's guy, shouldn't even be here because, it's the same thing as when somebody buys a team. You want to get your own people in there. You want to get your own general manager. You want to get your own manager. Who cares if Ramsey has this sort of weird cult following? He's not Gibbs's guy. Gibbs wants Brunell. Why should he give the guy who's not his guy a chance?
I think that's been the problem the Redskins have had the last 5 or 6 years. Every year they get new, coaching staff, personnel, defensive coaches. So every year somebody wants somebody different. So that's why you see the changeover year and after year. And like you said, Gibbs does not like Ramsey. I think it's been obvious. He drafted, Jason Campbell as kind of the, his guy
right.
in the draft.
And also brought in Brunell.
Right, and I think maybe he's just been looking for an excuse. Ramsey gets injured in the first game, kind of shakes it off and says he's okay to go back in. Gibbs doesn't, put him back in, and he's not going to get back in, looks like ever again. So I think Brunell will probably stick in there. But here's a guy who was booed as much as Ramsey was booed, earlier in the game. Last year, he couldn't complete, seeming like simple passes, lacked arm strength. So I think it's just a matter of time before Campbell gets in there. And, we're not talking about Ramsey or Brunell anymore.
The most popular guy in town is always backup quarterback. And, it's how it's going to be. I mean, it was like that last year. Watching them play the Bears this week was so reminiscent of last year. I was just watching the game and I'm like, all right, Clinton Portis has a big week. Is Patrick Ramsey going to be the quarterback? And it's all the same questions over again. It just always seems like the same story. And, controversy sells. The media likes to pump it up a little bit.
They do?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize that.
And with the Jason Campbell thing, that's just weird to me. I don't think Gibbs is going to be here that long. I know people think, he's in it for the long haul. He wants to make this team a winner again. Look at the Joey Harrington experiment over in Detroit. I mean, look at the Kyle Bowler experiment right down the road. These quarterbacks nowadays with the packages that the defensive coaches are bringing in are not developing that fast. And I don't think Joe Gibbs is going to be here that long to watch Jason Campbell turn into a starting quarterback. So it's either that Brunell's going to win right away and make Gibbs look good, or Ramsey's going to come back and we're all going to have to bite our tongue and watch him go in there and throw picks, but hopefully the defense can lock him down because he's not going to be there that long to see Jason Campbell win games or a Super Bowl.
Right, and then you make a good point about Gibbs. I mean, I think we all saw the Post's NFL preview, and which coach made the cover of that?
Yeah,
wasn't Gibbs.
Big old Greg Williams.
Exactly.
So.
I think let me get your opinion on this because this is my own little pet theory about the Redskins this year. They remind me a lot of the Ravens team that won the Super Bowl in the sense that their defense is fantastic. It's going to limit people to about 10 points a game, maybe 14, something like that. But it's going to play great. It's going to play good enough every single week to give you a chance to win. So conversely, on offense, you've got a really, really good running back. You've got some okay skill position people. Now all you need is a quarterback, like the Ravens found in Dilfer, who's not going to screw up.
Yeah.
So to me, Brunell is a guy who will turn around and give the ball to Portis. He will make short little safety valve passes. He will not screw up as much as Ramsey does.
But once teams realize that that's what you're doing, they're just going to throw everybody in there and just sit on Portis. You got to be able to establish yourself as somebody who's going to go out there. And though Ramsey takes risks and turns the ball over, you got a defense that can come back and get the ball back for you. Why not take those risks? Why not throw the ball downfield?
Because you're not
risk
scoring anyway.
But you're not going to win in the NFL just trying to protect. You use the Baltimore Ravens as a good example. That's one freak, time that happened.
I think that was an anomaly. They were a great defense. One of the, a lot of people say the best of all time, but you haven't seen them been able to repeat that. They have the same type of offense they've had during those, Super Bowl years, and still a great defense, but I don't think they made the playoffs last year. So the Redskins defense is good enough to win. Maybe even good enough to get them in the playoffs, but Brunell wasn't even able to be that, that quiet, the safety valve type of quarterback last year. So it's interesting to see. I'm thinking another 8-8 year for the Skins.
Yeah. Psychologically, what is it about Ramsey that has brought out this crazy sentiment in this town, rallying around him? I've watched Redskin games. I haven't seen anything about this kid that makes me think that he's going to be the guy to lead you to the promised land.
I think when he came out as a rookie, he was kind of that guy that was that came off the bench and he did, I think, play pretty good in some games where the Redskins had a real bad line and he was taking a pounding, and it was said, once we get a good line in here, he'll be able to play better. But he's been injured, and he's had different coaches. Some Spurrier didn't really like him. He wasn't his guy, so he's never really been able to get that. Coaches say, "You're my guy. Just go play a season. Get a season under your belt." He's always been in and out of the lineup.
And you say psychologically for the Washington area. What about psychologically for that guy? I mean, in any job, I don't care what you're doing. If somebody keeps coming in and pulling you out and saying you could be the hamburger flipper at McDonald's. If somebody keeps coming over and taking the thing out of your hand, you're not going to be able to do your job.
Yeah,
and your confidence is going to go down.
And that really ticked me off when they do that. Because I'd have the thing in my hand, and all of a sudden the manager would come over. I'm like, dude, you're only like 2 years older than I am. I don't even know how you became a manager.
Well, listen, I mean, honestly, look, the guy, I don't think he's been given a fair chance. All right, I think he's had, But Snyder back there bringing in different receivers, different coaches, different schemes. He's learning a different offense almost every single year. It's even a different offense this year than last year. Obviously, teams change their offenses and they add and they build and they revamp and they try to. But look at the offense last year. Gibbs took personal responsibility for that offense being what it was, and it was not an offense that was Gibbs-like we saw years back. So you have Ramsey who maybe hasn't gotten his fair shake, and just like every other professional sports franchise in the D.C. area, Ramsey's going to go on somewhere else and be a great quarterback, and he's going to win a lot. And people are going to say, "Look what we lost. Look at the Bullets and the Wizards, what they've produced for other franchises out there." It's going to be the same thing, and that's a shining example of it from the Skins giving up Ramsey. He's going to be gone by next year, guaranteed.
I don't know how great Ramsey's going to be somewhere else, but I mean, he could be another Gus Frerotte where he's serviceable. He can get some starts for another team. But the turnover rate in every facet of the team over for the Redskins of the past 7 years is, just kind of speaks to why they've only made the playoffs once in the last dozen seasons.
Right. Got to have a quarterback that can hold on to the football. God, the Jets stink. I have a migraine after that week. Oh, right, we're on the air. How's your fantasy team doing, by the way?
Not too good. I don't think any of my position players scored touchdown last week. But last week was the anomaly week where some guy named, I don't know, some Pittsburgh running back who we've never heard of.
Willie Parker.
Willie Parker was great.
And that really ticks me off was when you get people in your fantasy league that are so we all have lives. I'm proud to say that, believe it or not. I hate these people that are able to get on that waiver wire the minute they find out who the kid is who's playing running back for the Steelers that week. And all of a sudden you log on and you see Willie Parker. Who's Willie Parker? What is he, the hot dog guy? And then all of a sudden he comes in and he runs for 200 yards. It was ridiculous.
Actually, you're talking about me.
Oh, is that you?
Because when Peter Warwick, signed a one-year deal with the Seahawks, I'm laying in bed, right? And I'm looking at the ESPN ticker. It says Peter Warwick signs $1.4 million deal. I jump out of bed, okay, run to the computer, and I'm trying to get on there faster than anybody else in my league because we're all junkies and ESPN dorks like that. But, look, fantasy is a funny thing, man, and I sat Marvin Harrison this week, okay? I have to look at the public now and say, I sat Marvin Harrison last week because I got scared of the Baltimore Ravens defense. So I learned my lesson.
Yeah, our producer Brian Nern just made the L sign on the forehead, trying to make us feel
that
like
means
losers.
LaDainian, right?
Yeah, that means that.
Which Greg is trying to trade his entire roster
I'm trying to
for.
trade my whole roster for LaDainian Tomlinson. I've got a trade out there right now. I've got Reggie Wayne and Michael Vick and Jeff Wilkins, the kicker from the Rams, and Jerome Bettis for LT. Because that's my team. I'm trying to make the Lindros trade, the Herschel Walker trade for my team. I think it's going to work out nice. I can't believe he thinks we're losers, though. I saw him drop a 20-sided die on the way in.
Yeah, how's your Dungeons and Dragons team doing?
Exactly.
You got your Yu-Gi-Oh cards over there?
Exactly. Just because ESPN doesn't have a Magic the Gathering fantasy league yet. Ooh. Exactly.
Oh, man.
All right, back to high school for a second, boys. The Connection top 10 this week, real quick, counting down. Number 10, Langley. Number 9, Springfield. Both of them are 0-1, but we could not, in good faith, drop them out of the top 10. Stonebridge enters at number 8. They are 1-0 with the big win against Springfield. Yorktown is number 7 at 2-0. Jefferson 1-0 at number 6. Edison, number 5. They were number 7 last week. They move up and take the 5th position. And then, as usual, the top 4 in the Northern Region, Robinson, Centerville, Oakton, Westfield, counting down from 1 to 4. Robinson is absolutely the best team in the Northern Region right now probably until that Centerville game.
Maybe the state.
And
Maybe
it's
the whole
interesting to
DC
see
region.
some national district teams up there.
You got to give the National District some love. And I mean, again, that's going to be a case where, Edison and Yorktown are going to have their big face-off at some point, and then we'll see who comes out of that meeting. Stonebridge, I didn't think that they would be in the top 10 at this point in the season, and that win against Springfield is a real calling card that this is going to be a team to really watch in the Liberty District. I think that they might be, based off that win, the best team in the district. Although, maybe you watch that Jefferson-Langley game a little bit closer now to see if maybe Jefferson is the number 2 or number 1A team in that district, depending on what they do against Langley.
I think Langley's going to come out and establish themselves a little bit better than they did last week. I think they're going to come out and say we're here to stay in the Liberty District, and we are the team that everybody thought we were earlier in the season. I know you guys aren't so happy with the line over there, but their big guys are going to, like we say, they're going to get it going. And I still believe in that theory of, you got a big line in high school and you're going to do well. It's just going to take a little while to develop. So
Interesting to see that probably the top 2 teams in the Liberty right now were not in that district last year.
It's profound.
It is.
Brian Nern has passed a note to us here on the stage. Monday, September 19th, is International Talk Like a Pirate Day. And you can go to www.talklikeapirate.com. That better not be a naughty site, my friend, because we're going to get letters. All right, just checking.
Word.
Want to remind everybody that here on the Fairfax Sports Report and the Fairfax Sports Network, there are always things happening. The Fairfax Sports Report is Wednesdays at 10, Thursdays at 7, Fridays at 12 on Cox Cable Channel 10. News and commentary from local sports insiders and also us. Want to remind everybody that the FSN Cox Communications presentation, the high school game of the week, next week, West Potomac at Mount Vernon. It should be noted that we did pick that game, and it should be noted that I took West Pot. Rich Sanders took West Pot, and these 2 knuckleheads took Mount Vernon. Games air Saturdays at 6 on Cox 35, repeat daily at 5 a.m. and 6 p.m. when our show isn't on.
set your alarm clock.
FSN on the web, www.fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Check out the fun-filled photo gallery. Email us off that website if you have any questions or comments. Want to thank Quality Care Ford Service Center, conveniently located in Fairfax, servicing all makes and models, 703-383-6299. And of course, CCI Screen Printing, 703-978-0257. Any games on the docket this week that you have a special interest in? What about that South County, it should be said, opens up their home stadium with a game against visiting TC Williams, and Greg Sullivan in the Alexandria Gazette packet this week said we are not taking South County lightly. We are going in there to win and quote win big.
Not taking them lightly. That's a cliche I haven't heard.
Yeah, I've never
5
heard,
times.
I've never heard a coach say that.
But it was interesting to see them score last week. Something South Lakes wasn't able to do.
It's true. I wonder if TC will give 110% this week.
We all went out and played hard.
Well,
And-
if they execute.
yeah, well, and boom goes the dynamite. You know what I mean?
Thank you for watching, as usual, folks, and please join us next week for more fun, merriment, and football here on the Fairfax Sports Report. I happen to think that South County, by the end of the season, is going to be a team that's going to give a lot of people some trouble.
Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're wrong.
Fantastic.
Oh man.
And boom goes the dynamite. Always good to hear.
Oh.
Whoa!
Whoa, hold on.
I am
let me get a
18-2 in the box. It should be noted.
shot. Oh.
Oh no!
No.
There it goes.
I used to be good at that.
You could throw that over a mountain.